Sometimes the most dangerous place to be isn't rock bottom. It's success built on the wrong foundation. A full calendar, a stable income, even admiration from others. And yet, something inside you feels off. Not broken, just misplaced, misaligned. Like you're walking faster every day, but further away from something true. That feeling isn't random. It's not weakness. It's your soul whispering, "This isn't it." And the Stoics knew better than anyone. Ignoring that whisper is the beginning of quiet suffering. This episode is not about panic. It's not about tearing your life apart in search of instant clarity. It's about tuning in, slowing down, listening deeply to the subtle signs that your life might look fine on the surface, but underneath, it's drifting. These signs are not curses, they are signals. And if you're brave enough to see them, to confront them without denial or distraction, you can begin to shift course. With grace, with strength, with intention. Because you're not lost. You're just on the wrong path. And the moment you admit that is the moment you begin finding your way back. 1. You feel busy but unfulfilled. There's a strange kind of emptiness that hides behind constant activity. Your schedule is full. Your notifications don't stop. You're always on, always doing, always rushing. From the outside, it looks like momentum, progress, even success. But inside, there's a hollowness you can't quite name. A quiet ache that no amount of productivity can soothe. That's not laziness. That's not failure. That's a signal. Your life is packed with motion, but it's missing meaning. The Stoics warned us about this long before burnout had a name. They understood that busyness without purpose is a form of self-deception. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And often, what we waste it on are activities that look important, feel urgent, but leave us spiritually empty. We confuse motion with direction, effort with purpose. And worst of all, we confuse being needed with being alive. When you wake up every morning and dive straight into the rush, without reflection, without alignment, you begin to live reactively. You're not building, you're maintaining, you're not creating, you're coping. And slowly, your days become a blur of tasks completed and moments missed. You check things off a list, but feel no deeper connection to the person checking them. And that's the trap. Life becomes performance instead of participation. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly fulfilled? Not just busy, not just exhausted from doing enough, but truly engaged, rooted, alive in what you were doing. If you can't remember, it's time to pause. Not to quit everything, but to question everything. Where is your energy going? And is it building something real, or just protecting a version of you that looks successful but feels spiritually distant? The Stoic path is not one of endless hustle, it's one of alignment, of stripping away the noise to reconnect with what matters, to do less but better, to stop performing life and start living it deliberately. That doesn't mean abandoning all responsibility, it means checking your compass, asking if the mountain you're climbing is even yours to begin with. There's nothing noble about exhaustion without purpose. There's no glory in speed without direction, and no amount of external reward can fill the internal void created by a life misaligned with your values. So if you feel busy but unfulfilled, that's not something to brush aside. That's a blinking red light, a warning. Not that you're lazy, but that you're misaligned. And the most powerful thing you can do is not speed up, but stop, rethink, realign. Because true fulfillment isn't found in how much you do, it's found in how deeply what you do connects to who you are. 2. You constantly need external validation. It starts small. Maybe you share something and wait for the response, a compliment, a like, a nod of approval. But over time it becomes addictive. You check how many people agreed. You replay conversations in your head wondering if you said the right thing. You start tailoring your words, your actions, even your goals to match what others might applaud. And without realizing it, your inner compass, once strong, once clear, begins to spin, recalibrated not by your values, but by their reactions. The Stoics warned us about this trap because they understood how fragile a life becomes when it's built on external applause. Epictetus put it simply, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. It sounds harsh, but it's freeing, because the moment you stop chasing approval, you begin chasing truth. The moment you stop editing yourself for praise, you begin uncovering who you really are. The need for validation is human, but the dependence on it is dangerous. Because external praise is unstable, it changes with mood, with trend, with people's insecurities. One day, they celebrate you. The next, they criticize you for the same reason. And if your self-worth rises and falls with their reactions, you'll never feel whole. You'll be a slave to perception, applauded maybe, but never free. Look around your life. How many choices were made to be liked, not to be aligned? The career path you chose, the friendships you maintain, the image you present. Are they yours? Or were they built to win approval from people who never took the time to really understand you? The Stoic life is not a performance, it's a practice of returning again and again to your own judgment, not to arrogance, but to clarity, to the kind of self-trust that says, even if no one claps, I will still walk this path, because it's mine. That doesn't mean becoming defiant. It means becoming whole. It means doing what's right even when it's invisible. It means being okay with not being understood because you understand yourself. Validation from others can feel good, but it should be a reflection, not a requirement, a bonus, not the foundation. Because when your worth is rooted within, external voices become background noise, not commands. And in that silence, you find something rare. Peace that doesn't need to be earned. Direction that doesn't need to be applauded. Strength that doesn't beg for recognition. So if you find yourself constantly checking, measuring, waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough, pause. And remember, the Stoic doesn't ask, do they approve? The Stoic asks, is this in line with my character? Because only one of those questions leads to freedom. 3. You're always avoiding discomfort. There's a subtle, deceptive version of self-sabotage that looks like self-care, but is actually self-abandonment. You tell yourself you're protecting your peace by avoiding difficult conversations. You justify inaction as patience. You delay decisions, calling it timing, when deep down it's fear dressed as wisdom. And day by day, your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. You flinch at every friction. You step back from anything that stretches you. And eventually you stop growing, not because you can't, but because you refuse to feel what growth demands. The Stoics never glorified suffering for its own sake. They weren't masochists. But they understood a deeper truth. That comfort is not the same as peace, and avoidance is not the same as strength. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's the heart of it. The discomfort we fear isn't always real. It's often the ghost of pain, amplified by our unwillingness to face it. When you're always choosing the easier path, the smooth conversation, the low-stakes decision, you begin building a life of convenience over character. A life that feels safe but hollow, predictable but stagnant. And here's the quiet tragedy. The very thing you're running from, discomfort, is the birthplace of everything meaningful. Growth, honesty, courage, wisdom, none of these live in comfort zones. Think of the last time you avoided something uncomfortable. Maybe it was telling someone the truth. Maybe it was admitting you were wrong. Maybe it was starting something new, something that mattered, but felt too exposed. In that moment, your body wanted ease. Your mind wanted escape. And maybe you gave in. But did it actually bring peace? Or just temporary relief followed by lingering regret? Avoiding discomfort doesn't make it disappear, it makes it grow. It multiplies beneath the surface. It spreads into your habits, your relationships, your self-image, and slowly your world shrinks. You stop reaching, you stop risking, you begin to fear what you once handled with ease. And before you know it, the discomfort of staying stuck becomes greater than the discomfort you were running from in the first place. The Stoic path doesn't reject comfort, it simply doesn't worship it. It values integrity over ease, progress over perfection, truth over convenience. And that means developing a new relationship with discomfort, seeing it not as punishment, but as a teacher, as the thing that shows you where the work is, where the real growth lives. So how do you practice this? Start small. When the difficult conversation presents itself, don't delay it. Lean in with presence. When a task feels overwhelming, don't wait for confidence. Begin with clarity. When your instinct is to distract, pause instead. Sit with the tension. Let it pass through you without controlling your response. Over time, this builds emotional muscle. Not the loud kind, but the kind that holds stillness under pressure. Discomfort, handled with courage, becomes fuel. The conversation you feared can lead to deeper intimacy. The failure you dreaded can reveal untapped resilience. The fear you faced can reshape your identity, not into someone who never feels afraid, but into someone who's no longer ruled by it. So ask yourself, where in your life are you choosing comfort over character? What hard truth have you been avoiding? What dream have you been delaying just because it stings to start? And more importantly, what kind of strength is waiting for you on the other side of discomfort? Because a path without friction may feel smooth, but it rarely leads anywhere worth going. The Stoic walks the harder road not to suffer, but to grow. And that road is paved with honesty, tension, uncertainty, and the quiet, powerful transformation that follows. 4. You betray your values for short-term rewards. There's a kind of success that leaves you empty. You hit the goal, you get the raise, you earn the praise. On paper, everything looks perfect, but inside, there's a quiet fracture, a subtle disconnect that begins to echo louder the longer you ignore it. You start to feel like a stranger in your own life, not because you failed, but because you've won the wrong game. And you know it, because deep down, you can feel the cost. And it's usually your values. The Stoics taught that virtue, not victory, is the true measure of a life well lived. You don't compromise your principles for convenience, popularity, or short-term gain. If you do, you may gain the world, but lose your compass. And once that happens, everything begins to blur. You start to justify things you once swore you'd never tolerate. You make small concessions, calling them necessary. You silence your voice in rooms where you used to speak with conviction. And little by little, you drift. At first, it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like adaptation, like being strategic, like playing the game. You convince yourself it's temporary, that once you've made enough money, Once you've secured the opportunity, once people finally respect you, then you'll realign. Then you'll return to your principles. But that's the trap. The more you abandon your values, the harder they are to return to, because every compromise rewires your identity. Every betrayal of what matters makes the next one easier. And before you know it, you've built a life that no longer reflects who you are, only who you thought you needed to be. This path is deceptive because it's praised. Society rewards results, outcomes, performance, not integrity, not internal alignment. And so, you get celebrated while feeling more and more disconnected from yourself. You achieve what you chased, but feel none of the meaning you imagined. And that's when the warning signs appear. The restlessness, the anxiety, the sharp awareness that you've traded authenticity for acceptance, clarity for applause. The Stoics would tell you that trade is too expensive, because integrity once lost is not easily restored. It can be rebuilt, yes, but only through courageous realignment, through the willingness to say, "This isn't who I am anymore." Even if it means walking away from comfort, even if it means disappointing people who only loved the version of you that served them. And this isn't just about moral purity, it's about energy. Every time you act against your values, you create internal friction. You burn energy trying to justify what you know isn't right. You live in constant low-grade tension, smiling on the outside, but collapsing inside. But when you live in alignment, that energy returns. You become lighter, clearer, sharper, because there's no inner war draining your focus, no identity to maintain, just truth to embody. So ask yourself with ruthless honesty, where in your life are you betraying your values for validation, comfort, or convenience? What agreements have you made, internally or externally, that go against what you know to be right? And are those rewards really worth the cost of your peace? Because the Stoic life is not about perfection, it's about course correction. It's about noticing when you've strayed and having the strength to return, to realign, to say, "I'd rather lose approval than lose myself." That kind of clarity, it's rare, but it's also the beginning of true freedom. 5. You ignore that inner whisper. There's a voice inside you that doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in tension, in hesitation, in that deep, quiet discomfort that shows up when you're headed in the wrong direction, even if the world applauds your path. It's not loud, it doesn't scream, it whispers. And most of us spend years trying to silence it. We drown it in distraction. We bury it under logic. We tell ourselves, "This is what I'm supposed to do," even as something deep inside us is whispering, "But this isn't who I am." That whisper isn't weakness. It's your truth trying to survive. The Stoics would never call that voice emotional noise. They would call it your daemon, the part of you that knows, that sees, even when your mind is clouded by fear or ambition. Marcus Aurelius wrote of it constantly, this inner guide that isn't influenced by reward or reputation. He believed that when you live in conflict with it, no external success can bring peace. And when you live in harmony with it, no external challenge can truly disturb you. So why do we ignore it? Because that whisper is often inconvenient. It doesn't flatter your ego. It doesn't align with your current lifestyle. It disrupts plans you've already committed to. It threatens comfort. And perhaps worst of all, it demands change. Not cosmetic change, but foundational change. The kind that reorders your priorities, your identity, even your relationships. So instead, you try to quiet it. You label it as doubt or fear or just stress. You push it aside with busyness, but it never truly leaves. It waits, it watches, and every time you make a decision that contradicts it, it tightens its grip, not to punish, but to protect. Ignoring that whisper doesn't make it disappear. It just creates distance between who you are and who you pretend to be. And the longer that distance grows, the more exhausted you become. Because living out of alignment isn't just emotionally tiring, it's spiritually draining. You begin to feel disconnected from your own life, like you're starring in a movie you didn't choose, reading lines you don't believe in anymore. And that feeling? It's not depression. It's not confusion. It's a warning. There is immense courage in listening to that inner voice, especially when it tells you something you don't want to hear. Maybe it's telling you to leave, to change paths, to say no to something others would kill for. To admit that what you've built isn't truly yours. That's not rebellion, it's awakening. And while it may shake your world, it will also rebuild your integrity from the inside out. So pause, tune in. What has your soul been whispering for weeks, months, even years? What truth have you silenced because you didn't feel ready to act on it? And here's the thing, you don't need to solve everything today. You just need to stop pretending you don't hear it. You need to acknowledge it, to say, I hear you. I'm listening now, because awareness is the beginning of alignment, and alignment is the beginning of peace. The Stoic life is not about controlling every outcome. It's about controlling your orientation, your loyalty to what is true, even when it's uncomfortable. And sometimes the wisest decision you'll ever make is not to run faster or work harder, but to sit still long enough to finally hear yourself. That whisper, it's not random, it's a lifeline, and it will never leave you. Only wait for the moment you're ready to return. 6. You feel disconnected from who you used to be. There's a moment that hits you in the quiet, when the noise fades, the tasks stop, and you finally sit with yourself. And suddenly, you can't recognize the person staring back at you. You remember who you were, what lit you up, what you believed in, how you spoke, how you laughed. But now your voice feels edited, your goals feel heavy, your life feels like it belongs to someone else. A version of you built more on survival, performance, and approval than on authenticity. It doesn't happen all at once. The drift is slow. You tell yourself you're evolving, maturing, becoming more responsible. And maybe you are. But sometimes what we call growth is actually compromise. Sometimes we confuse fitting in with moving forward. And little by little, our reflection begins to blur, not from time, but from disconnection. The Stoics warned about this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and when your thoughts are shaped by fear, comparison, or endless ambition, your soul changes color too. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in subtle shifts. The things you once loved now seem unrealistic. The convictions you held now feel inconvenient. The joy you once carried feels immature, and without noticing, you start building a life that impresses others, but estranges yourself. This disconnection isn't just philosophical, it's physical. You feel tired even after rest. You start dreading the things you used to enjoy. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. You achieve, but you don't feel alive. And that's the paradox of being on the wrong path. The world might applaud you while your soul quietly withdraws. You don't need to go backwards. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about reintegration. Because who you used to be wasn't naive. They were honest, curious, raw. There was something in that version of you that you weren't supposed to grow out of. You were meant to carry it with you. The wonder, the honesty, the fire. Losing touch with that doesn't mean you've failed. It means it's time to return, not to who you were, but to what was real in you before you began negotiating with life. Reconnection begins with brutal honesty. What parts of your current life feel like masks? What parts feel like obligations, not choices? What have you stopped doing? Not because it no longer fits, but because it no longer impresses. The answers might sting, but they will also free you. The Stoic path is not about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about waking up to the realization that evolution is supposed to expand you, not erase you. That maturity should bring depth, not distance from your essence. That strength doesn't mean abandoning your softness, and that success without soul is just another form of loss. So if you feel disconnected from who you used to be, don't dismiss it. Don't label it as burnout or boredom or a phase. Listen to it. Sit with it. Let it show you what you've abandoned and what you still have time to recover. Because the life you truly want, the one that feels real, is not somewhere far away. It's closer than you think. It begins the moment you stop pretending and start remembering. 7. You surround yourself with people who drain you. There's no quicker way to lose your direction than to walk it with the wrong company. And yet, many of us tolerate environments that deplete us, not because we're weak, but because we confuse familiarity with alignment. We stay loyal to circles that don't inspire us. We engage in conversations that leave us dull, not wiser. We entertain relationships that challenge our peace more than they challenge our growth. And slowly, our energy is siphoned. Not in one dramatic blow, but in subtle daily leaks we learn to normalize. The Stoics were deeply mindful of influence. They understood that we don't just become what we think, we become who we're around. Seneca cautioned, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." It wasn't elitism, it was discipline. Because your environment is not neutral, it shapes your mind, your mood, your ambition, your standards. And if you constantly surround yourself with people who gossip, complain, mock growth, or reject truth, you'll begin to lower yourself, not even consciously, but quietly. You'll become more reactive, less honest, more guarded, less inspired, and sometimes it's not obvious. The people who drain you aren't always toxic in the traditional sense. They may be kind, charming, familiar, but you'll know them by how you feel after being with them. Do you feel lighter or heavier, clearer or more confused, energized or subtly ashamed? This is the emotional audit most people avoid, because it often points to relationships that are convenient but not compatible. History, not harmony. Proximity, not purpose. The cost of staying in draining environments is not just fatigue, it's misdirection. You stop pursuing what you care about because no one around you values it. You mute your voice because those around you don't listen deeply. You lose momentum because the people in your life normalize stagnation. And slowly, you begin to question whether your dreams were ever realistic, or whether your standards were ever worth it. But the truth is, your dreams didn't die. They were just drowned out by the wrong voices. Choosing better company doesn't make you arrogant, it makes you responsible. Responsible for your energy, for your direction, for your future. The Stoic chooses his environment with the same care he chooses his thoughts. Because both are shaping forces. You cannot create clarity in a cloud of noise. You cannot build peace while surrounded by chaos. And you cannot grow upward when constantly pulled sideways by those who do not share your inner vision. This doesn't mean cutting people off with cruelty. It means stepping back with quiet courage. It means protecting your focus without needing to explain it. It means being available to truth more than you are to tradition. Because alignment often demands difficult choices, especially when you realize that not everyone who came with you is meant to go with you. So pause and reflect. Who in your life gives you energy? Who drains it? Who sharpens you? Who dulls you? Who listens not just to reply, but to understand? And who, even in their silence, respects your growth? The answers are already within you. Your body knows, your energy knows, your intuition knows. Now, your responsibility is to act on what you feel, because every step you take with people who weaken you is a step away from the version of yourself you were meant to become. 8. You numb instead of reflect. There's a difference between resting and escaping, between choosing peace and chasing distraction. And in today's world, that line is thinner than ever. You've had a long day, and instead of sitting with your thoughts, you reach for the remote. You scroll endlessly. You binge something, anything, not because it brings you joy, but because silence feels unbearable. Reflection feels inconvenient. And without realizing it, you've replaced awareness with avoidance. The Stoics believed that reflection was the cornerstone of a good life, that to live without self-examination was to drift, driven not by reason, but by impulse. Epictetus taught that we must daily examine our thoughts, our actions, and our emotions, not with judgment, but with precision, because when you stop asking why, you start living on autopilot, and autopilot is the enemy of growth. Numbing doesn't always look like addiction. It often looks like routine, like reaching for your phone every time you feel something uncomfortable, like overworking so you don't have to feel lonely, like filling your day with noise so you don't have to hear your doubts. But avoidance, no matter how well disguised, always comes with a cost. You begin to lose contact with yourself, and the longer you go without that contact, the harder it becomes to hear your own truth. And here's the trap. Numbing works. Temporarily, it softens the sting. It pushes the discomfort just far enough away so you can breathe, but it never resolves it. It only delays it, and what's delayed doesn't disappear. It grows. Beneath the surface, the tension builds, the questions wait, the misalignment quietly festers, until one day the distraction stops working, and you're left face to face with everything you were running from. The Stoic approach isn't to reject comfort, it's to question its purpose. Are you resting to restore, or are you escaping to forget? Are you choosing silence to hear yourself, or are you afraid of what might surface when everything else fades? The answers aren't easy, but they are necessary. Because every moment spent avoiding your inner world is a moment spent deepening the disconnection. So how do you shift? You begin by creating space. 10 quiet minutes in the morning, not filled with news or texts or notifications, but with breath and observation. You journal without trying to sound wise. You ask yourself what you've been avoiding and why. And you do it daily, not as a punishment, but as a practice, like brushing your teeth, like preparing your body, only this time for clarity. And yes, at first, discomfort will rise. The truth always does. But so will direction, so will insight, so will relief. The kind that doesn't fade after an episode ends or a feed refreshes. You'll begin to remember that reflection is not a burden. It's a return, a coming home to yourself after wandering in everyone else's noise. Ask yourself now, what have I been using to numb? What emotions have I avoided? What patterns have I chosen not to examine? And what would happen if, instead of reaching for distraction, I reached inward? Because numbness may feel safe, but it slowly kills your vitality. Reflection may feel sharp, but it brings you back to life. The Stoic doesn't seek comfort at all costs. The Stoic seeks clarity, even when it stings. Because clarity is where your power lives, and reflection is how you reclaim it. 9. You compromise peace for the sake of being productive. We live in a culture that treats rest like laziness and productivity like virtue, where your value is measured by how much you can do, how fast you can move, and how available you are to everyone but yourself. So you wake up early, grind through tasks, chase goals, answer every message, and keep going, even when your mind is fractured and your soul is begging you to slow down. And the most dangerous part? You call this strength. You call it discipline. But deep down, you know something feels wrong. The Stoics understood the difference between activity and wisdom. They didn't equate busyness with purpose. In fact, they warned against it. Seneca wrote, "Being busy is often a form of mental laziness, busy to avoid thinking, busy to avoid feeling." And that's the paradox. What the world celebrates as productivity can often be a clever disguise for avoidance. You're not moving with direction. You're sprinting from stillness. You fear slowing down, not because you'll fall behind, but because silence might show you how far off course you really are. When you sacrifice peace for output, you begin to lose the essence of who you are. You become a machine, efficient, reliable, exhausted. You hit milestones that no longer matter. You build things that don't fulfill you. You check every box but feel more and more like a stranger in your own life. And in that process, you mistake momentum for meaning. But here's the truth. Productivity that comes at the expense of presence is not success. It's slavery. If your day is full, but your mind is scattered, if your inbox is cleared, but your heart is heavy, if you meet every deadline, but can't sleep at night, that's not power. That's collapse wearing a mask. The Stoic path isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters and doing it with intention. It's about creating space in your day, not just to perform, but to feel, to think, to breathe, to check in with yourself and ask, is this pace sustainable? Is this task aligned with my values? Is this goal even mine? You don't have to reject ambition. You just have to reject the illusion that burnout is proof of dedication. Real strength is knowing when to pause, when to reset, when to say, I won't trade my clarity for another hour of unchecked hustle. And that's a decision you must make repeatedly, because the world will never stop demanding more of you. It's your job to say, enough. So begin small. Block out 10 minutes for silence before the day consumes you. Close your eyes. Listen to your body. Let your thoughts settle without reaching for a screen. Notice what rises. That's your truth. That's the part of you that gets buried beneath constant motion. And that's the voice you must protect if you want to live, not just function. Ask yourself, what am I building with all this effort? And is it costing me the very peace I'm hoping it will someday earn? Because peace is not the reward you get after grinding yourself into the ground. It's the compass you follow, so you never lose yourself in the first place. 10. You rarely experience presence. You wake up and your first thought is what you have to do, not how you feel, not where you are, but the next thing, and the next, and the next. You move through your day not as a human being, but as a checklist, one task bleeding into the next, one conversation overshadowed by the next responsibility. You eat, but you're already thinking about the call after. You listen, but only halfway, because your mind is preparing a reply. You reach your goals, but you never fully arrive. That's the warning. When your life becomes a blur of doing without being, you're on the wrong path. Because presence isn't just a spiritual idea, it's the soil of everything real. Without it, even the most beautiful moments feel hollow. Even love feels distracted. Even success feels rushed. And deep down, you start to feel like life is passing through you, not unfolding within you. The Stoics placed immense value on presence, not as escapism, but as the highest form of discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Why? Because the present is the only place where choice exists, where change begins, where clarity is found. Everything else, the past and the future, is noise if not anchored to this moment. But the modern world pulls us away from presence at every turn. Notifications, deadlines, comparison, constant stimulation. You're trained to believe that being on all the time is necessary, that pausing means falling behind. And so, your mind becomes a highway of distraction, always thinking ahead, always bracing for what's next. You stop noticing the texture of life, the sound of silence, the look in someone's eyes when they speak to you. You miss it all, not because you're careless, but because you've been conditioned to be elsewhere. And the cost is real. Without presence, there's no depth, no intimacy, no true joy. You laugh, but your mind is still processing the last problem. You reach milestones, but your heart isn't there to feel them. You move fast, but you're not alive. You're just available. So what's the way back? It starts with slowing down, not quitting, not running to a retreat in the mountains, just slowing down enough to observe your own mind, to see when it drifts, to notice when your body is here, but your thoughts are miles ahead. And in that noticing, you come back. Even for a moment, that's enough. One deep breath, one mindful sip of water, one conversation where you're fully there. These are the anchors. These are the proof that you're still capable of returning. The Stoics believed that control over the mind was the highest freedom, not controlling outcomes, not people, but attention. To be here, to choose not to be owned by a future that hasn't arrived or a past that no longer lives. That's power, and it's built in quiet ways. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly present? Not productive, not efficient, but awake, listening, feeling, engaged. If it's hard to remember, that's not failure, it's feedback. And the solution isn't more effort, it's more awareness. Because the wrong path always leads away from the present. But the right one? It begins the moment you return to where you are. 11. You react constantly instead of responding wisely. Life will test you through people, pressure, and unpredictability. That's a fact. But how you respond, that's a decision. And there's a subtle but critical difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is fast, emotional, instinctive. It's driven by fear, ego, or insecurity. A response is measured, conscious, grounded. It's driven by values. And the more you find yourself reacting, snapping, defending, overthinking, apologizing, regretting, the more it reveals something essential. Your inner foundation may not be as steady as you think. The Stoics believed that mastery wasn't about what happened to you. It was about how you handled it. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And what he meant wasn't suppression. It was sovereignty, the ability to pause, to create space between trigger and action, to choose clarity over chaos. That space, that pause, that's where your freedom lives. But today, the world doesn't encourage stillness. It rewards immediacy. Someone criticizes you. You respond in seconds. An email triggers anxiety. You fire back. A post offends you. You argue in the comments. And slowly, you become a puppet of your environment. Your emotions are controlled by algorithms. Your identity becomes a reflection of other people's moods, and your sense of direction is constantly hijacked by noise. This constant reactivity isn't just stressful, it's dangerous. It means your center is too easily shaken. It means every minor obstacle becomes a crisis. Every disagreement feels personal. Every setback feels final. And over time you start avoiding challenges, not because you're weak, but because you're tired. Tired of being so reactive that even small things feel heavy. So how do you return to wise response? The first step is awareness. You must begin to notice the moments when you're being pulled, emotionally, mentally, energetically. You must ask, am I choosing this reaction, or am I being swept into it? Am I acting from alignment or from the desire to win, defend, or please? Then, you practice the pause. Even 3 seconds of stillness can change your life. A breath before you reply. A moment to feel instead of fix. A space to ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? Not just in the next 5 minutes, but in the context of who I want to be. Responding wisely doesn't mean you become emotionless. It means your emotions no longer govern you. You still feel, but you don't flinch. You still engage, but you don't escalate. You remain grounded, even when the world is spinning around you. And that, according to the Stoics, is the essence of real power. Because anyone can react. It takes no discipline to be offended. It takes no strength to lash out, but to remain calm under pressure, to respond with reason when insulted, to protect your peace without explanation. That is the mark of someone who has built a strong inner citadel. So ask yourself, where in your life are you reacting too quickly? What situations pull you out of character? Who triggers you to become someone you don't recognize? These aren't signs of failure, they're invitations to step back, to recalibrate, to reclaim control. Because if you keep reacting to life, you'll always be chasing peace. But if you start responding to it, you'll begin to lead it. 12. You know something has to change, and you keep postponing it. There's a kind of heaviness that doesn't come from overwork. It comes from knowing you're on the wrong path, knowing something in your life is out of alignment, a job that drains you, a relationship that's not growing, a habit that's eroding your confidence, and you've felt it for a while, not as panic, not even as pain, but as a persistent ache, a quiet voice saying, "This isn't it." But instead of acting, you delay. You tell yourself, "Now's not the time. It's not that bad. I'll wait until I'm ready." And in that waiting, regret begins to grow. The Stoics weren't afraid of discomfort, but they feared one thing deeply: regret rooted in inaction. Seneca wrote, "While we wait for life, life passes." And that's the warning. Not that your life will collapse if you don't act, but that it will quietly drift. That you'll wake up years from now wondering how you got so far from yourself. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you kept postponing the moment you would do it. There's a dangerous myth we buy into, the idea that we'll have more courage later, that someday we'll feel more ready, more stable, more supported. But that day rarely comes. What we call waiting for the right time is often just fear in a costume. Fear of disruption, fear of change, fear of disappointing others. And the longer you let fear drive, the harder it is to remember what it felt like to choose from truth. You already know what needs to shift. You've known for a while. The hard part isn't clarity, it's commitment. It's trusting that the discomfort of change, though sharp, is cleaner than the slow decay of staying stuck. Because staying in the wrong place doesn't just rob you of joy, it rewires your identity. You start believing that settling is strength, that stagnation is stability, that surviving is living. But deep down, your soul doesn't want safety. It wants sincerity. It wants alignment. It wants to breathe again, to move again, to feel like you are truly inhabiting your life instead of performing it. The Stoics would remind you, clarity without action is a kind of self-betrayal. Knowing what's wrong but refusing to move is not harmless. It creates a fracture inside you, a split between what you live and what you believe. And no amount of external success can soothe that internal tension. So stop waiting for the perfect conditions. They don't exist. Stop telling yourself you need more time. You don't need more time, you need more honesty. You need to admit that what you're postponing is costing you more than it's protecting. And you need to act, not with panic, not with reckless urgency, but with calm, deliberate courage. Ask yourself now, what truth have I been avoiding? What decision have I delayed so long it started to define me? What would happen if I acted, not perfectly, but honestly? Because the deepest warning in life is not external, it's internal. It's the voice you keep hearing, the shift you keep sensing, the change you keep postponing, and the longer you ignore it, the louder regret becomes. But today, you can choose differently. You can listen. You can begin. There's a moment in every life when the noise quiets, the distractions fall away, and what's left is the truth you've been carrying all along. The sense that something isn't quite right, that maybe you've been moving fast in the wrong direction, that perhaps the life you're building doesn't fully reflect the person you were meant to become. And if you felt that lately, not as a crisis, but as a quiet discomfort, this isn't something to fear. It's something to honor, because the greatest gift you can give yourself is the willingness to pause and listen, to stop just long enough to ask, is this really the life I want to keep building? Not out of self-judgment, but out of deep respect for the one life you've been given. The Stoics never promised a straight path, but they did promise clarity to those brave enough to seek it. And if this episode has done anything, let it be this. Let it remind you that misalignment is not failure, it's feedback, a compass correction, a signal that it's time to return, not to who you were, but to who you are when you're honest, present, and unafraid to change. So take one truth from today, one sign you recognize in yourself, and act on it. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but with intention. Because every step back toward alignment, no matter how small, is a return to peace. And peace is not something you find at the end of the path. It's something you choose with every step. If this message spoke to something in you, share it with someone who's also been drifting. Subscribe for more reflections like this. And remember, your direction matters more than your speed. Start walking your true path today, quietly, courageously, with your eyes open.